let's get into the Zcash stuff. So first and foremost, I talked to you guys at the end of last week about the vulnerability and the bug that was discovered in the Orchard protocol. So don't be intimidated by some of the terminology we're using here. I think one of the best ways to get better at learning a new language, and that's kind of what we have with crypto here, because you're bringing in finance terms, you're bringing in software terms. It is a very kind of complex dialect if you're not familiar with either of those, right? And I come from primarily a person who has a lot of interest in tech previously, and some experience learning about finance and financial markets, but still even today I constantly improving myself. So don't be intimidated by that. I'm going to give you guys the kind of the high level stuff that I think you need to understand as far as like what the actual risk here is for even future projections that retail is going to have in relations to, is Zcash safe? Is there a true value in the scarcity? Do we have supply integrity? That's the main issue here. It's not that Zcash is guaranteed broken. It doesn't mean that there's even a guarantee that any value was counterfeited or stolen. But I'm going to explain to you guys what happens if and how we find out if it did happen in kind of those different scenarios. So Orchard is the shielded pool. It is a pool on the Zcash protocol where you guys can store completely private transactions, right? There's another type of Zcash representation, that's the UTXOs, which are very similar to how Bitcoin operates, and those are transparent. You'll know because your address will have a little T at the beginning. Some unified addresses won't clearly state that, but you also will know kind of where you bought the Zcash and where it's sitting right now, whether it's shielded or not. Most of the time, if you are shielding your Zcash, it is a relatively intentional process. So the affected bug or the affected soundness issue that we found was within the Orchard protocol itself, so within that shielded pool. So right now there's like 16.5-ish, 16.7 million Zcash in circulation, 21 million max, obviously just like Bitcoin has the halving and a clear distribution and minting and reward schedule. Within that Orchard pool, right around 4 million Zcash sits in that pool right now. So it's like 25%, give or take, of the total supply. So what we are talking about with the amount of Zcash that could potentially be counterfeited is more limited than just, hey, this affected the entire protocol. So again, this is just inside of the shielded pool environment. Now, within the Zcash protocol, you have turnstiles essentially on both sides of the pool. So accounting for what goes in and accounting for what comes out. So long term, you do have the ability to, essentially stop a certain amount of inflation just massively hitting the market all at once. So there hasn't been any direct evidence of mass deposits and withdrawals in and out of the shielded pool, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't slowly occurring over time, because this has been in place since 2022. This bug has been there since Orchard launched in 2022, and they haven't had anybody really push it to this point where you've been able to notice that there was this bug in there that created the inability to verify without a doubt that the transactions inside of the shielded pool are being done correctly without violating those constraints. So I know this is probably a little bit confusing already just because there's a lot going on here, but those turnstiles still can be helpful as far as analytics on the backside of this. When we look at what's inside the shielded pool, those are opaque, right? We can't see what's happening inside there. So we know that one person went in, but it doesn't mean they didn't have something in their pocket that they weren't supposed to have, and they were able to duplicate Zcash and create additional issuance or claims inside of the Orchard protocol. Now, what they're proposing here with the Ironwood is that if we eventually sunset Orchard, which is the current shielded pool, and we move over to Ironwood, what you need to see is a migration eventually of all of those tokens from Orchard, which is the current privacy pool, shielded pool, over to Ironwood, which would be the new pool. What you would do is you basically would have a block height or a maximum supply that's allowed to come back out based on what we know went in, based on the turnstile counts. And once that redemption has been reached, so let's say it's 1 million, right? Just hypothetically, it's 1 million. They know that there's 1 million that needs to come out. The second somebody tries to bridge, if there is even any, additional Zcash from the Orchard pool to the Ironwood pool, if we've already reached that maximum redemption period, which should be the true count across what the Zcash main protocol recognizes, that's when we know that there was inflation, right? But unfortunately, you're going to have to wait until that entire balance gets transferred and somebody says, hey, I have a claim here, this is for 50 Zcash, and I can't redeem it. I can't take this into the new shielded pool. That's when you know you have a problem. So right now, it is still Schrodinger's bug. Was any value stolen? did someone else know about this exploit? Did someone utilize this exploit and create additional value and slowly bring it out? The reason that we didn't see this immediately when someone just created that value is because, again, there is not a ability to see inside of the shielded pool of the transactions that are occurring inside. So with that flaw in smart contract logic, we were able to create additional Zcash inside. So if you don't have this massive reversal, meaning that you don't suddenly have a request to withdraw or redeem more than what's actually in the pool, that's not going to trigger this crazy event, right? It could have been something that slowly happened over time. Even a lot of other people in the space, including Kat, but from Ripple, has said that it's very low likeliness that any value was actually counterfeited and any of it was stolen. But it's unfortunately going to take time for us to see that pool fill out if this is the next step that's taken here for us to prove that there is supply integrity. Okay, so my reductions last week really were as a risk management tool. I do think that you still could see another bad knee-jerk reaction in the market if you even get an inkling of that there is true inflation, right? We get that pool fill up very quickly, reach that redemption period. If there is any inflation, I think the market will react horribly negatively, because any additional Zcash that is left in that Orchard pool that is not being able to be redeemed because it exceeds what the turnstile count, anyone who still has their Zcash in that Orchard protocol are unfortunately just bearing the cross of that cost. Like, all of that Zcash that they have in there is going to be useless because they're not going to issue more Zcash to make those people whole, right? Because then we're just really deteriorating the entire proof of work model. So this isn't to strike fear into everybody's hearts. I still hold 10% of my Zcash, but I think it's time, while we let this flesh out, to look at other opportunities and be cautious and take some profits here. I would rather be the bad guy here, telling you guys to take your 10x off the table because there's some weird stuff afoot, and you guys miss out on another 2-3x instead of watching us come back down to some really crazy prices and see another knee jerk because there was a lack of supply integrity. So that's kind of my 2 cents there. If you guys have any questions on this portion, please let me know in the Discord. I want to clarify anything you guys have questions about, but I wanted to discuss this. I also talked about this on YouTube, kind of a little bit of a different format because Gavin and I did it together. So definitely more color on it there, but this is the stuff that I really needed you guys, my team that's been following this for a long time, to understand firsthand as far as where my head's at with this. This could prove that there is no additional inflation, but again, it's going to require us to reach that point of full redemption and not see a single person say, here's my ticket, here's my redemption, here's my claim, I can't redeem because we've reached maximum, right?